Don Quixote, always respecting the rules of chivalry, sadly accepted defeat and returned home with Sancho. And so, Don Quixote's whimsical adventures came to an end. Is it really that simple? Of course, there were many details involved, including the fact that the Knight of the White Moon was actually Samson in disguise, hoping to cure Don Quixote of his madness by sending him back home to recover. Some people actually preferred Don Quixote to remain mad. Cervantes created a character who said something very meaningful. If you heal this incomprehensible madman, you harm everyone. Do you know that a clear-headed Don Quixote is of little use? It's the madcap Don Quixote who provides endless amusement. Once he's cured, we lose not only a comical knight but also a comical squire. This master and servant bring joy in dull times. In fact, this was Cervantes' motivation for writing Don Quixote. We practically laughed our way through this entire book because it's so full of entertaining tales. Everyone thought, as long as I'm not Don Quixote or Sancho, let the fun continue endlessly. So, there's a thought-provoking line in the book. Don Quixote is mad, but what about us? Which one of us is the real lunatic? A madman who can't make up his own mind, or a madman who volunteers to act as a crazy person? It's a question worth pondering. Let's talk about Don Quixote's ending. He lost the duel and felt disheartened. Sancho comforted him, saying, "My master, a heroic champion enjoys victory and feels elated, but he also remains composed in defeat. That's been my experience. Though I had fun as a governor, I'm not troubled returning to being a squire. I've heard that fate is like a tipsy old lady, capricious and blind. She stumbles through life, bumping into someone and helping others, but she is completely unaware of that." This is still Sancho's familiar style, sounding rough but making sense when you think about it. Just like that, no storms or sunshine, they decided to live like shepherds with their friends. Sancho knelt when he saw his homeland, saying, "I'll never forget my homeland. Look how your son Sancho's come back. Though he never made a fortune, he's taken a lot of lashes. Your son, Don Quixote, has returned too. So, welcome with open arms. Though he lost to others, he defeated himself. According to what he told me before, it is the most amazing victory in the world." This final statement by Sancho really resonates with philosophical undertones. So, with joy and happiness, Sancho went home to see his wife and children. Don Quixote, on the other hand, returned home and fell ill, bedridden for 6 days. He called for a doctor, who warned that his health was failing and his soul needed saving. Don Quixote remained calm upon hearing this. He slept soundly and upon waking, thanked the Almighty for granting him great grace. His mind also started to clear, realizing that many of the night novels he had read were utter nonsense. He declared that he was no longer Don Quixote, but the kind Alonso Quijano. Do you remember this name? This was his original name, the local nobleman. He instructed his steward to invite Sancho and their friends, and made his will, comprising 3 main points. Firstly, the money he had entrusted to Sancho before leaving was to be returned. The steward's wages would be paid in full, and the remainder of his estate was left to his niece. Secondly, his niece would only inherit if she married someone who had never read a night novel. Otherwise, the estate would be donated to charitable organizations. Lastly, the 2 gentlemen entrusted with executing his will were to apologize sincerely to the author of the second part of Don Quixote should they ever meet him. Even though he hadn't commissioned it, that ridiculously absurd book was still for him, and he felt guilty about it until the day he died. This will still retain a touch of Don Quixote's whimsical and humorous style. I wonder if Cervantes wrote this final scene with a bit of comedy to lighten the sorrow of parting. After making his will, Don Quixote fainted several times. There was chaos at the time, but his niece continued to eat as usual, the steward to drink, and Sancho to eat and drink and reunite at home. And so, Don Quixote, with his imaginative thoughts, ended his life. Meanwhile, the local gentleman peacefully closed his eyes. 400 years have passed, and both Don Quixote and Cervantes have left their names in their respective histories. After reading this book, perhaps we should reflect on whether each of us has a bit of Don Quixote and Sancho in us. I suddenly remembered a song that seems fitting for Don Quixote. It's a modern song by Su Huilun called Fool. There are two lines that go, "Don't call me a fool, I'm just pretending to be one, but I'm not afraid. Maybe I'm a fool, but I'm not afraid of jokes, since the power of fools is great." Yes, the power of fools is great. That's why Su Huilun named her first concert Fool's Invincible Landing on Earth. She removed all the packaging and was very real, directly and vividly singing Fool. It seems like it touched the hearts of all the listeners. This fool is constantly innovating, constantly challenging herself, and has never stopped walking on the road she wanted. As the song says, I was really a fool. Everyone wants to be considered smart, but sometimes being too clever isn't all it's cracked up to be. There are always those fools, like Don Quixote, who have no pretenses, only genuine sincerity in their actions. They don't scheme cunningly, they just live straightforwardly. Once they've decided on something, they go all in. When they love someone, it's without reservation. At work, they do their best. With friends, they open their hearts completely. Sometimes you realize that fool isn't lacking in intelligence, but simply lives life differently. It might seem funny, but they fear nothing at all. That's why the British critic Hazlitt believed that Don Quixote, this absurd story, reveals moving and profound emotions and ideas. It makes you laugh and cry. When we pity him, we're reflecting on our own disappointments. And even as we laugh at him, deep down, we understand that Don Quixote isn't any more laughable than we are. That's the story of Don Quixote. Besides being a laughable madman, he also had an adorable and respectable side. What do you think?